My doctorate degree is in chemical physics or physical chemistry. It's just as the name sounds, where the two worlds meet. So instead of beakers, it's mostly equations. My focus was, my thesis was on electrochemistry, so like fuel cells, batteries, that kind of thing, from the University of Calgary. Graduated in 2008, and that's my extent of my education. It was like, there was one fuel cell company in Calgary, Global Thermoelectric is I think what they called themselves, but they were not hiring, and there was Ballard Fuel Cells in Vancouver. When I went into school, fuel cells were the rage. But in 2007 when I finished my thesis, and 2008 when I went into the market, there's no jobs for me in Canada, and the United States was really only just starting to get into lithium-ion batteries and that kind of thing. Like back in those days, nickel metal hydrides were still the rage, right? And so it was like looking at the job markets, and it's like, I'm gonna have to move all the way to Beijing, and I didn't want to do that. So I decided just to reinvent myself, and got a junior position with a company called Golder Associates. They're just an environmental consultancy agency here based in Calgary, and I started building weather stations. I was doing a lot of field work, Quebec, and up in the high Arctic, and the pay was not commensurate with my years of university, but when you reinvent yourself, you got to go with what you get, right? So, but it was a good stepping stone from there to within like 6-9 months, I moved into a role with Suncor Energy up in Fort McMurray, and it was a senior position, but no senior people wanted to move from Calgary or elsewhere to Fort McMurray, so they were forced to take a junior, me. And so I got the opportunity to work on a groundbreaking geotechnical engineering project where I was focusing on attempting to reclaim one of Suncor's ponds, tailings pond. It was full. They had an agreement in their permit with the Alberta government to have it converted to a trafficable surface by a certain date. And so I came along and helped them develop an idea that they had about how to put a floating trafficable surface on this surface of this pond. And so I was up there for 3 years, and it was just a phenomenal experience. Being fresh out of school, just being given the opportunity to grow at a very, very steep rate, huge amount of responsibility, very exciting project. It made me fall in love with the oil sands industry, because I come from a very poor background, and I fought my way to get an education. I was one of the first people in my family to ever get a university degree, and then I got a doctorate degree, and then I had all this debt, and I'm like, oh, I got to pay it off. And but up there, but particularly back in the boom days, it was the place to be for young people, fresh out of school, looking to make quick buck, but get world-class work experience. It's just a real shot in the arm, and I was up there for a few years, and yeah, so that was quite the jump. And I reinvented myself there, and it was wicked. I think that's probably one of the biggest things I learned was how to learn again. Forward from my Suncor years, up till the late teens, though the political pressure is coming down on the industry, the headhunters, the recruiters weren't calling anymore. A lot of layoffs were going on. I had a gig, And I'd moved into an executive role in a startup oil sands company after between 2016 and 2020. And but when the lockdowns happened in 2020 and oil went negative, I got a package. And but I knew it was coming. I could see the storm clouds for a couple of years before. And so my wife and I preemptively decided, well, maybe it's time to embrace your blue-collar roots a little bit, because there was no white-collar gigs for Dr. Fournier. It just was nothing. And so we bought some property out northeast of Strathmore, 100 kilometers east of Calgary, and started learning a whole new profession all over again. As a child, I'd been exposed a bit to ranching, but as a kid, I never actually designed a ranch and built one from scratch. So it started from 2020 to present. I've been doing that full time. At times, absolutely, not near enough. Like 11 years university, you learn a lot. So it's helpful to have a firm understanding of soil science. It's helpful to understand atmospheric physics. Farmers, no surprise, are usually very well informed when it comes to common meteorological concepts. They're always reading the Farmer's Almanac. They understand what the El Nino Southern Oscillation is. Often, you'd be surprised talking to a lot of these guys. It pays to understand meteorology when you're a farmer or a rancher, right? So, but it's not quite enough. I'd like now, I find myself looking for opportunities like this, talking with people like yourself. I'm always looking for new opportunities to engage with professionals in particularly the advocacy space, the education space for energy and environment topics. Yeah, you bet. I grew up, so I was born in '76, 49 years old. I was born in Lloydminster, and then in the late '70s moved up to the Yukon, and lived in the Yukon for about 11 years. And rural environment up there. No running water. We lived many times, we lived so remote, there was no power, no natural gas. We hauled firewood, cut firewood, hauled it in with dog team for central heating. Propane lights often for quite a bit of that experience. I grew up very rustic, but I learned how to trap. I had my own trap line as a kid. And also my biological father. I grew up a lot with my stepfather and my mom because there was divorce in the family. But my biological father, who I moved away from late in my teens, he also really gave me an exposure to some blue collar heritage, which is my father was a big game outfitter and a rancher. And so late teens and the 20s, interacting with him, helping him on a ranch, helping him on his outfitting territory, further gave me an exposure to, I'm no stranger to wildlife, no stranger to hard work, building things. Animals. I've always been very much at home with animals since I was a little boy. Back in the 80s, we were so poor. The only money, if you wanted to make money, you had to do something. I couldn't get a job selling newspaper because we lived 70 kilometers out of town. So what could I do? Well, I used to sell, at 9 years old, my first hobby I had was raising California meat rabbits. Just building myself some cages and then started producing babies and then putting ads in the newspaper and people would pay me. It's like and that was like 9. I was 9 years old and like 1985, and then all through my childhood up to my mid-teens, I did that, like rabbits and chickens, seasonal. I would buy meat chickens, and not egg chickens. I did that with pigs a little bit too. So that was just as a little boy. I was very attracted to growing animals, and not so much as pets, but like it's their food, But anybody who's a rancher or does animal husbandry, you still love your animals. You still care for them. You still like it's different than a pet, but no matter what the weather is, they come first. Animals eat, then you eat. That's sort of like the way I was raised, And so that's where I got my exposure to animals as a child. But there was a huge gap there, obviously, from my teens up until my 40s. So when I went back, had a foundation, but there's a big difference between going to a bank, getting a loan, putting together a business case, and then going and building it, and then hoping that you don't go bankrupt while you're trying to learn, right? Big difference between what I did as a child to what I'm doing now. I'm a paleo diet kind of guy, and I crave. I don't crave bread. I don't crave pasta. I crave fat and protein and salt and I like complex carbohydrates. So like it's in my DNA. So when I hear all these things about plant-based foods and animals are your article you wrote there, are cows the new coal? It goes against who I am. It goes against everything I understand about diet, and also that people are different. Some people like paleo, they crave it, particularly O-type bloods, people, Aboriginal, Indigenous peoples. They don't do well on bread and flour and pasta and stuff like that, right? So that I reject a lot of those claims. Taxes, well, energy taxes, put them in the same category as pressures to reduce investment in oil and gas. I know what the net effect is, and that is all prices will rise. If you reduce the supply of energy, the price will go up. If you put a tax on energy, no doubt the price goes up. And everybody today is very, very familiar with the idea that everything else costs so much now. Money costs more, your borrowing cost is higher. Food is just one of them. Everything seems to be going up higher now. And, so on top of the science, yeah, you're right. My doctorate degree in chemical physics isn't a doctorate degree in meteorology, but I can read and I can understand and I can learn faster than most because of my formal training, right? And just like people within your organization, they do the same thing. They just read and they learn and they write about it. And that's science, the methodology of practicing science. You don't have to be an academic meteorologist to have an opinion and to come up with good questions. My understanding of the topic has brought me to the conclusion that a lot of the emphasis that you see when it comes to putting a cost on carbon, when you see people talking about every single negative weather event somehow has the fingerprint of human influence on it, and and then you look at the methodology, you look deeper as a scientist, you look deeper into that study that was done. I'm always left with a very clear impression that number one, the peer review process is highly questionable. It's becoming more and more understood that today's peer review process is not like yesterday's. Now it's more like pal review, right? And so you pick your peer reviewers that you want. So you pick your buddies, you pick your pals, and there's so much pressure to get publications, and publications that get citations and press releases. And so all of this pressure on academia over the last particularly 20 years has produced what we now see, which is an industrial complex. I call it a climate industrial complex.
Publishing.
That just publishes for the sake of getting clicks. And it's so much of it is just garbage science. And all you got to do if there's a bad weather event is get someone to agree with you that that's due to us, and now you've suddenly got yourself guaranteed funding. And whereas lost all objectivity, like the fact that there's always been remarkable, catastrophic changes in climate throughout history, and there's nothing new about that. So when I started to become skeptical after grad school. During grad school, I was doing fuel cells. I saw global warming. I saw the rapid warming as a child in the 80s and the 90s. I grew up in Yukon. The winters warmed massively and rapidly. Like in 1980s, late 70s, it was like 60 below was very common in the wintertime. By the time the 1990s came around, the coldest we ever saw was like 40. So the minimums, in huge warming in the minimum temperatures, the annual minimum. So it was particularly the winter. The summers not so much. So I was like, and everybody was saying as a child, everybody's saying it's global warming, it's humans, it's global warming. So I never ever questioned it. And then I went into school in British Columbia, and so was part of the system. And British Columbia universities are very, very liberal and very environmental. And I didn't start to question things until well after I graduated, like 2009, I remember, when I was working in the north, and we had 50 below. And I hadn't seen 50 below in 2009. I hadn't seen 50 below since like 1982. And that was without wind chill. And then that period of 2009 to like 2013 was so much snow. Just wicked temperature, wicked winters. That was when we had our big flood here in Calgary, right? All that huge snow event, delayed onset of melting, and then a monsoon melted it in the mountains. So that period was very influential for me because that's where I started going, this doesn't make sense. And so around 2000, about 12 years ago, I really started to, I need to read this, I need to study this, I need to start understanding why things aren't the way they were before. I never bothered to even question once before. I even got a doctorate degree thinking I was I'm going to save the planet, right? And, well, fast forward to today, it's like I have a very different impression, very different opinion on the topic. And you lose track. You really lose track. You don't know how many policies. Every time you turn around, there's a new one. And I think it's because there's a lot of people who are going into politics these days. They want to social justice, and they want to save the world. you know, it's a messianic type of complex a bit, and I think people, if you want to become a missionary, become a missionary. You know, like, right? If you want to get involved in politics, then don't forget to fill the potholes first, right? Like, you see that so much. It's like here in Calgary, we see it all the time with the mayor of Calgary. You know, it's not my mayor, but you see it all the time. It's been
82 billion on
yeah,
climate emergency and nothing on potable.
or water lines that need to be replaced because they haven't thought of it, they neglected that, right? So it's the people who are going into politics these days are driven by an ideological desire to bring justice and save humanity. You know, and you need some balance. You know, there's always going to be injustice, but we can't forget the meat and potatoes first.